Hey, this is Notser, and today we're taking a look at Kleber. This is the Tier 10 French DD, and this is in 0.9.0, where the Kleber received significant nerfs to surface detection, air detection, and torpedo detection. It's across the board, all three were changed for the worse. I'm going to talk about the changes, how I'm mitigating it, and just general thoughts during the gameplay and highlighting anything that may have changed in the moment-to-moment combat where you would have to consider these changes. The build is on the screen. It is the exact same build that I used prior to 0.9.0. I did consider and try a rudder shift mod in slot 4, but I went back to the acceleration mod. It ends up working out very nicely for the French, and honestly, I missed it too much. But the changes are very significant, and they are the following. Surface detection, 9.88 kilometers base. Air detection, 5.38 kilometers base. Torpedo detection, 1.8 kilometers instead of 1.4. So across the board, you are less concealed from both surface and air, and your torpedoes are easier to see. It's like a triple threat of nerfs to a DD. Yeah, it's literally the last things you would ever want to have nerfed, and they, of course, nerf them. Now, obviously, those are the base. With the ability to equip all the concealment modules and the commander skill and your camo, you can get your detection down to 7.8 kilometers. That's the absolute maximum it can be enhanced to. The Mogador is around 7.5 kilometers with the exact same style build. For air detection, it's 4.4 kilometers. And you'll notice that this enemy Enterprise, he's actually going to spot us before our air can even activate. And I'm trying to get the hell away from him and retreat over to my Prince Eugen. Hopefully, the AA combined can protect us from any damage, and I'm just trying to be as thin as possible, rely on the speed, and the speed does not let me down, especially against the Enterprise. The Enterprise has horrible airspeed. If there is one aircraft carrier that sucks attacking, it's the Enterprise. It also has the Havar rockets, so he had a perpendicular attack, which wasn't ever going to work. So it never ended worked out for him, but that extra air detection is an issue. You will be spotted more easily from air, and it will keep you spotted longer. You won't have any response. The skill of the aircraft carrier commander, though, to keep you spotted and not be in anti-air range, that's not going to happen too frequently. It's not the most important change, but it is a change that you have to consider. The most important change is the base concealment of the surface ship. 7.8 kilometers is really hard. You have 200 meters to send your torpedo without being spotted. A lot of your techniques end up being more towards leading a target that has his momentum coming towards you on torpedo strikes, rather than what you could have used prior to 0.9.0 is you could sail up to the person and have about a kilometer or so worth of dead zone where you had enough leeway that they weren't going to accidentally spot you. They had to deliberately commit to it. So the Shima, who we did get good damage on, is capturing A point. I decided to move forward, maybe in an attempt to get some torpedoes. This is pretty brazen. I don't know exactly what's out there. There is a Seattle, which does obviously have radar, and ooh, a juicy Seattle broadside. They are engaging my Shima. I decide, let's pull the trigger with main battery reload. Let's go after this guy's broadside. And we're clearly going to be doing good broadside damage. No Citadel yet, though. I'm definitely looking for a Citadel. And the longer he goes without firing, the less chance. And oh, we actually hit a torp hit on the Shima. So the torpedo detection is worse. 1.8 versus 1.4. But effectively, nothing has really changed. The torpedoes are so fast that, yes, the worst detection sucks, but it doesn't really change it that too much. I still get plenty of strikes with my torps. I haven't noticed that. The biggest one is that surface detection, and it reduces your ability to do an assassination play on DDs, for instance. You guys are probably very familiar with this play from my point of view, where you use speed boost and you just, who gives a crap about the target detecting you? Radio location is going to point you in the right direction. You get within his detection, use your main battery, and assassinate a DD. That is much, much harder to do. You have nearly a full kilometer worth of distance that you have to cover since the last patch. And that doesn't happen too frequently. They have really stamped out that play. Maybe in certain situations I could, in open water, rush towards him aggressively for long enough that I eventually would detect him, and then I could activate main battery reload. But based on my play, it seems to take twice as long to develop that kind of play, and that's too long. You're risking your ship far too long if you're trying to rush into a DD's or a cruiser's position and use main battery to blap them out of existence. That's just not something that is as feasible, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't happen. I have found out that there are plenty of players who are fully willing to openly fire as a DD and to do it in a way that's within 10 kilometers of me, and that's a really bad play. As a DD, you don't want to be 10 kilometers away from a Kleber with main battery reload, because he's going to do a significant amount of damage. And I do a significant amount of damage, but because I have to play so much further back, I can't assassinate the DD the same way. I put too much of my ship out there for that. It feels a lot more methodical than the brutal power that the Kleber and the Mogador would have over the game. This feels more, measured, and I think that's a fair thing. Initially, I was so disappointed, and I am still disappointed that the torpedoes are not as incorporated in my play. Like back in the day, one patch ago, I would take my Kleber, I would rush right up to about 7.5 on an enemy battleship, know full well that they can't return fire, and I would point blank torp them. If I do that same play, I have to move everything back. The enemy battleship is 8 kilometers or 8.5. I got to be careful. If I get too close, then he's just going to auto-detect me because my speed and my closing rate is so great that I can't stop myself. I have to play just more measured. I can't take the kind of risks because I'm not going to guarantee the kind of rewards. I have played games in 9.0 where I've tried to do the aggressive pursuit into an enemy DD. Sometimes it works, but most times it just ends up causing me to waste more time and to be spotted for longer. And that ends up costing me health, and I can't afford to lose health, especially early on. So effectively, early to mid game is more conservative from the Kleber. There are definitely maps where I just can't take the objective. Like B point on this map at the beginning of the game, hell no, ain't a possibility. The Kleber needs to be on the fringe, and preferably the capture that has the least amount of enemies to give you the best chance to actually get the cap. And a lot of times that is not enough. So, on some of the maps, I just refuse to go for the cap immediately. Not to necessarily capture it, I refuse that, but I will still contest it. I will still be in the area to try and punish players who may try and take it in front of me. And then if I know the enemy is within a certain distance, I can set up a plan that may involve islands blocking incoming fire. But I didn't have to do that before. I didn't have to consider that at all with the previous version. The previous version, I could just sail directly towards that person, and by the time I detected him and actually fired on him, and he detected me and fired on me, he had a window of probably 10 seconds where his teammates could help him, and then I was gone like a flash. That is definitely not possible early game. It needs most of the enemy ships defeated. It needs a lot less of the line of sight. Now, we do have a volunteer, enemy Shima, trying to take B point. I'm going to try and use the typical aggressive accelerate towards the closest DD with radiolocation and use main battery reload. And I'm going to show you just how long we're spotted. It feels like an eternity because it's almost a kilometer extra of time, but eventually we'll get close enough to this person. And then the same exact thing happens. When you activate main battery reload, you magically kill these DDs before they even have any chance to return. And just as effective, right? But there's just a bigger window of failure, a bigger window of counter, and you have to try and read what the opponent is looking to try and do. In this instance, I could attack. Who cares about Enterprise Torpedo? Torpedo's not going to do anything to me. But the Amalfi gets a good return fire, and I'm trying to turn back away and drop off detection. But we're still being detected by air. Still detected. We would not be detected at this point prior to this. Finally, now we actually would be detected. More than enough time to get away and for the aircraft carrier to consider, you know, maybe I don't want to do this. Maybe keeping him spotted is not in my best interest, but because it's so much easier to keep you spotted and it's so much more punishing, every bit counts. You're going to see that people are just more willing to spot you with their surface ships, to spot you with air. There's both air and surface safe zones that they can exist at, and a very skilled play could keep you spotted indefinitely without actually having any response from you. That is a concern, but you do move at 55 knots. So even if they're the best player in the game going up against it, they still eventually will have to retreat. So it's all on the distance that you have to travel in order to actually show the target for you to kill versus how much health you have and how many enemies could engage you. That ends up being the thought that I have all the time, constantly. Can I approach this person in an aggressive way? Do I have enough health? Is there enough people in this area? And if all of those questions have one of the wrong answers, then I'm going, well, you know what? Let's just continue to fire from range and see if it develops in the next 30 seconds. So I end up firing my guns far more frequently. I do get a chance to use my torps, but just not as frequently. The Mogador is a little bit more reasonable in that way, with 7.5 kilometer detection with the 8 kilometer range torpedoes. It's a little less likely that you're going to use the 55 knots and accidentally be detected. And I felt that in the Mogador. It was just easier to play, nearly identical to how I played in 8.11. Kleber, you pretty much have to relearn how to play it if you're an assassin. If you're an assassin, they've nerfed a lot of what you're trying to do, torpedoes, detection. But if you're a long-range gunner, and you've played sort of the clan battle IFHE build, your detection's going to be worse by about 1 kilometer. And that means that it's harder to use your torpedoes, ever. You know, very specific situations are your torpedoes usable with that kind of concealment, 8.7 or so. It's really, though, targeted at the assassination attempts. They're much harder. It's much harder to dip in, send out all your torps, and dip out. It's much closer to the line that you have to ride, and you have to be careful. But everything that was here, the main battery, the speed boost, the damage, it's all still intact. It's just that you have to be more understanding of exactly what is the potential threat and whether you can afford to try and attack. It's not quite as unbridled. And Unstoppable, I loved the previous version, but I understand. It was ridiculous. So if they had to nerf one aspect for the assassinations to be a little bit more reasonable, this is probably the best way to do it. Do I like it? Hell no. I loved being able to assassinate every DD on the map and also then torpedo point blank a bunch of battleships, but I understand. That was kind of ridiculous, and dealing with that was much harder than it was for the Kleber. This is much more 50-50. It feels like a back and forth with regard to concealment and when to go in and when to not. Thanks for watching. If you'd like to check out more of my content, you can click the most recent or the most relevant uploads. You could also choose to subscribe to my channel. We do daily Notser videos, first impression, how-to, news, and review related. My North American recruit invite is on the screen. You can take advantage of that. I stream at twitch.tv/Notser. Thank you, have a wonderful day, and I'll catch you next time.